in and get settled here. Welcome to a very, very special episode of the Rushfield Lunch at a very special time. This is a show I bring in, basically the smartest people I know in and around Hollywood and the culture at large, to talk about sort of what the heck is going on in the world these days, and what I joked that the big question is what the hell is wrong with everybody right now, and hopefully we'll get to that because there's no one who could explain that better than my guest, who is Hollywood's isn't brimming over with wise men these days, but this is one of the true wise men of the industry, and I I feel every column I write, I almost want to I want to call you up and get you to explain what's really going on there with me and bounce off whatever I'm doing off you. I try to not bother you more than once a month or so with it. Anyway, let me introduce you. This is my guest today. There are super agents, and then there is Robert Newman. Uh, d- uh, the WME's doyen of the film department, who has a roster of sort of the most creative auteurs in this industry. His the directors that whose careers you have guided and managed incredible list, including Danny Boyle, Kevin Brana, David Cronenberg, Alfonso Cuarón, Guillermo del Toro, Garland, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Baz Luhrmann, Noah Hawley, Robert Rodriguez, Ruben Östlund, and M. Night Shyamalan. I'm going to say the last name wrong.
Shyamalan,
Forgive me
close enough.
For your client, among many others. But more than just an agent, he's one of the great minds in this industry. One of the few people who really just sees through the dust and the glitz here to the essential issues of working in a very fast changing creative space, and whose sage wisdom is one of the bedrocks of this industry. Robert Newman joined Endeavor in 2007 after 17 years as an agent at ICM, where he'd been named head of the motion picture department. And prior to ICM, he worked for 6 years at Miramax Film, where he ran marketing and distribution. That's quite a career. And we start out every show with asking more or less, how did a nice boy like you get mixed up in all this? How did you get here? How did this happen to you?
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction, Richard. It's kind of simple. I was a movie fan from a very early age. I don't know how I became obsessed, but I did. I remember convincing one of my babysitters against their better judgment to take me to Dirty Dozen and Planet of the Apes, and was off to the races from there. And if you ever read Quentin Tarantino's book, Cinema Speculations, and he talks about growing up as a movie crazed kid in Los Angeles with a single mother, no father around, and him going all over taking buses to all sorts of sketchy neighborhoods in Los Angeles to go see movies. That was me. And although I was in New York, so from Flatbush to 42nd Street to the Village to playing hooky. I hope my kids aren't listening to this. To go see, Alfred Hitchcock's Lady Vanishes or Brando movies or whatever. I was just obsessed.
Then do you remember what your first movie was?
I vaguely remember my mother taking me to either To Kill a Mockingbird or maybe Charlie Chaplin at MoMA. But the things I remember loving were early on were the Beatles movies, the Bond movies, obviously, and then Dirty Dozen into Planet of the Apes. I remember my grandfather, when I was 10 years old, he walked me into Wild Bunch, but he was visiting a relative nearby, so he just plopped me in the theater. I've never been so grateful to anybody for anything they've ever done for me. So, I used to clip out movie reviews, always, and organize all my friends to go see everything from Raquel Welch movies to Roman Polanski's Repulsion at the Elgin, the now defunct, long defunct Elgin Theater in the Village, which was a great old repertory house. And at one point, I talked my way into becoming an usher there at the age of 15 years old, where I promptly became undoubtedly the world's worst usher. Because the times ushers are supposed to be doing the most work is when they always show double features at the Elgin. And so when the first movie's ending, you're supposed to be ushering people in. But of course, I wanted to sit there and watch the whole movie. I didn't want to go usher people around, so I was dreadful, and they dutifully fired me for my poor work. but it was a great place to see things. And they used to show Midnight to Dawn on Saturday night, all four Marx Brothers movies, four Bogarts, Woody Allen, El Topo, Yellow Submarine, all the Altmans. So that was
education.
Yeah, it was.
So how did you come by your first job in the industry?
Well, first I was at NYU Film School because I wanted to be an aspiring director, and I quickly realized, if I think I could recognize talent, and all the stuff that I was doing on my own was basically just ripping off movies I liked shamelessly, from Saturday Night Fever to Cheech and Chong's Up in Smoke to there was Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. But I felt it did give me some. I started to realize, I'm not meant to be. I'm not going to deprive the world the next Scorsese if I don't pursue this. But I thought, okay, what else can I be doing in the business? And in retrospect, it was really useful because in Hunter Thompson's book, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, he talks about the fact that he once ran for, I think it was sheriff of Woody Creek, and now he's covering Richard Nixon. He said, obviously, there's a big difference between running for mayor of Woody Creek and covering the presidency, but he says it did give me some understanding of what it was like to be in front of the voters, as it were. And at NYU Film School, I remember from the very beginning, I cut one of my movies, and it was, again, a ripoff of Strangers on a Train. It was pretty dark and involved a kidnapping plot. And you're showing it to all what feels like the entire world. There's 50 kids in your class. And the lights went up, and it's like, who did that one? And it was pretty dark and disturbing. Everyone's kind of looking around. I was like, yeah, it was me. But then when something worked well, you like, to this day, I could tell you where it got a laugh, where I felt it was too slow. And one time, when you would write a script, the graduate students would critique you. So I sent a script I was very proud of called Shoot to Kill, which was, again, just basically a ripoff and parody of Starsky and Hutch and Dirty Harry and stuff like that. And so I'm taking the elevator at the old Tisch building, whatever it was in the Village. And two of them, all of a sudden I hear one student say to the other one, did you read that script, Shoot to Kill? And one says, yeah, what'd you think? He said, oh, I really liked it. I'm feeling all proud of myself. And the other one said, oh, I thought it was just derivative, and the plot didn't go anywhere, and the characters really thin. I'm like, yeah, I guess you kind of have a point there. And then I walked into the room with both of them, go, hello. But it did give me, I guess, some understanding of what it'd be like to be a filmmaker who has to have their work critiqued, who has to show to test audiences. So that's what I got out of it. But they had an opening for this little company called Miramax as a messenger for $3.50 an hour. And so I applied for that while I was still at school, and I started working.
How many employees were there at that point?
Oh God, Brad Gray was still there. He was running the management side of it. Mostly the concert business. Harvey Weinstein, who ran the company, had a thriving concert business in Buffalo, and it was a pretty small skeletal office. And I started off there, and over the years learned, took over acquisitions, publicity, marketing, distribution, and still getting Harvey Weinstein's tuna fish sandwiches in my spare time.
Glad you're not doing that now. But you're one of what? So what was it like doing distribution and working on at that time when the art house, when they were really creating this whole sector of art house was becoming indie film. And I bemoaned a lot. I was just on a panel yesterday at Slam Dance with talking about crazy ideas for theater and talking about that spirit of sort of leaning into controversy and like stirring and not just of this kind of courageousness about your product and defending and looking to mix it up. Everyone seems to play it with the marketing and distribution for movies. You just feel like everyone is playing it so safe and so protective and just longing for that spirit. I think so. What was that like being part of that after my?
Well, you make some interesting points because Harvey, among other things, was a brilliant showman, and he learned a lot of it from the concert business. I remember weekends standing out with him with flyers where we'd go to 57th Street, wherever they had another art movie or a specialized film, whatever, and handing out leaflets for our movies. He had a very clear understanding of trying to interest, a consumer, in spending money at his thing. It wasn't an abstract removed process for him, especially in the concert business. It was a lot of walk up business, day of show business. So he was extremely understanding of that, and as you said, endlessly inventive, would court controversy. I remember early on, I was in Cannes with him, and we saw some movie. It was based on Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, called Erendira. It's very special, a very, as they would say, arty film. And I said to Harvey, "How do we sell this?" He goes, "It's easy. It's a Nobel laureate, and you've got sex." Like, got it. I had the roadmap was clear, and so that was what he would do, and very canny about using publicity and marketing tools that were free. And he was an extremely endlessly inventive thinker, and as they would say, out of the box.
Well, you think of how these days people are so terrified that anybody will object to anything in your movie and anything in your career. And I mean, it feels like he would have hired protesters to picket his movies,
Yes.
or paid for outrage and controversy. Like, how do we need that spirit, and do we need more of that? Obviously, not Harvey particularly, but
no. You look at what Chalamet did with Marty Supreme. It was just like it was a lot of the things that A24 does. They don't spend the most money, bang per buck, but every time, I've been fortunate to have a number of clients there. Alex Garland had great success there, and they've been extremely, supportive and loyal of him throughout his career. From Ex Machina, he's doing a big movie now called Elden Ring, based on a massive video game. And you look at what Nicolette and Noah and Daniel and David do over there. It's not just about spending money. They are extremely inventive and think about showmanship, how to create events, that the customary ways of selling movies and listen and engendering interest among audiences is just not what it was. It's not, you just can't buy the 30-second spot on Friends on a Thursday night and think your work is done.
No. So the trajectory, the career trajectory from Lou Wasserman down to the present is supposed to be that you go from being an agent to being an executive at a studio, and you went the other way. How did that happen? How do you explain that?
Well, I was in New York on distributing movies. Distributed a movie on my own called Little Vera, and I kept thinking I've seen a lot of careers from early stages when you work at companies like Miramax. And I'd like to have a continuing role within that. And I thought, well, what can I be doing? And could it be part of a major agency? And then I started thinking about, well, I certainly know how to construct a distribution deal from the distributor side to make sure a producer never sees any money, because they did a lot at Miramax and knew exactly how to structure it. I said, what if I did it on the other side? What if I started representing producers and trying to make distribution deals for them? I said, if I start to do it in a major agency, they've got muscle, so they can enforce their deals, and you have access to talent, and access to projects, and I could start doing it from there. And so I called up Jeff Bergkold, who was then running ICM, and to his credit, he took my call, and I gave him my pitch about what I could be doing for him. And I went in, and he said, and he listened for a bit. He goes, "Well, do you know how to write a business plan?" I said, "Yes." And I'd never seen a business plan before in my life. And I went to the library, researched how to do one that Friday, and had one on his desk.
When someone says, "Are you the key master?" you say yes.
Exactly. That was the master of the business plans. And I had one on his desk Monday morning, and he moved me out to Los Angeles, and I started doing from representing distribution rights and for my ICM. And then little by little, all of a sudden, I see a filmmaker named Robert Rodriguez on El Mariachi, or I saw a film named called Shallow Grave, directed by Danny Boyle, or I saw Strictly Ballroom, directed by Baz Luhrmann, or Mike Figgis came to me and said, "I've got the script Leaving Las Vegas. Could you help me put that together?" Or I helped sell Kronos by this filmmaker named Alfonso Cuarón. Or I'm in Toronto and I see this brilliant movie, Love in the Time of Hysteria, by a director named Alfonso Cuarón. So that's little by little, that's how it all began.
What do you, particularly during the strike and the Writers Guild action, there a lot of talk about what agents do or don't do. What do people get wrong about what the job of agents is, and what agents can do for you or don't do for you?
Well, it's not always an easy job, but it is a straightforward one. The simplest explanation for an agent is find somebody you think is wildly talented and start yelling about it from the top of the roofs, and go tell Richard Rushfield, Richard, I've got an actor you have to meet with. I've got a script you have to read. I've got a movie you have to see. And if you don't like it, you don't have to take my calls ever again. So find talented people, tie yourself to them, and jump off the building with them.
And has that changed in the decades since you've been doing it? Is
No,
that
it's
still
I mean, things change about the job, things change about the various sources of financing, sources of distribution, but ultimately the job remains the same. Find talented people, champion in their work, be tireless about figuring out how to promote it further, be it on social media, on stunts, or whatever, how to get the widest possible audience for your client's work, and how to ensure that they receive the economic benefits of it and structure deals that reward them. And again, get the biggest possible audience. It's all focused on get their work out there.
Well, one thing that's extraordinary about your list, I was thinking about it as going through it, is these are people that by and large, a lot of them have been with you a very long time and have had very long careers. There aren't, if you go back to the time when you were signing Danny Boyle and Roger Rodriguez, there aren't a lot of directors who started out those days who are still working right now. And those and these talent Baz Luhrmann, all those ones that you've signed have they've gone in a lot of different directions and at different periods in their career, and they still keep doing and going and having very vibrant careers. So how'd you do it? How does that happen?
You think long term. Just you. That's what the sole goal is, because you can never tell in the short term what's going to work for them. Guillermo del Toro could have directed Harry Potter, and instead there was a little Spanish language film he wanted to do that didn't have U.S. distribution at the time, where the girl was a 10-year-old girl as a lead who dies at the end, and it was called Pan's Labyrinth. Was that on paper? Is that the best career move? It's but you bet on Guillermo del Toro, and that the things that he's most excited about are going to pay off. Danny Boyle turned down a lot of things, and he made a movie that was a third in Hindi called Slumdog Millionaire. The first Warner Brothers passed on it. It didn't for a minute. It was going to go to the Hindi home video market, and we moved to Searchlight, and it swept every award it was up for. So if you bet on talent in terms of what the works that they're most excited about, and fully support the work throughout distribution and throughout the marketing, you have the best chances of long-term success.
But is it hard doing those kind of very personal projects? Is that harder to set up these days? Is that harder to establish yourself with those now than it was?
There's so much negativity sometimes about the business and about why things are always harder. I'll give an example. Like I was thinking when Rob Reiner passed away, there was a lot of articles talking about well, those kinds of movies can't get made anymore. And just for my own edification, I went and looked it up, and in terms of what they cost at the time and what the ultimate and what it would be in today's dollars. From most of them, from Princess Bride and When Harry Met Sally, they were in modern days, they'd be Misery, they'd be $25, $30, $40 million. You could still get those movies made today. You could Few Good Men, even, which was the most, which would have been 100 million today. Well, you had the two biggest movie stars almost on the world at that time, Nicholson and Tom Cruise. So I always tend to believe that if you've got something great, it can still get done. Kenneth Branagh went out during COVID, got Belfast made, and black and white movie, highly personal, was his coming of age story. Focus and Peter Kujawski and Kiska and Jason Cassidy took it to many awards, and he won his first. As someone who's been nominated for every single award under the sun, he won his first Oscar for best original screenplay. So I tend to believe that people always have room in their lives for great.
So I want to put a nickel in the machine and get you to repeat something you've told me. I think it's one of your rules that I think about all the time when I'm thinking about Hollywood, and I believe it's your 10% rule, or is it your 5% rule? I might be getting the math wrong.
Well, that most things aren't brilliant. Is that sort of it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have a theory that most everything isn't amazing. Most agents aren't amazing. Maybe most journalists aren't amazing. Most restaurants aren't amazing. Most movies aren't amazing. Most television shows. But for me personally, I didn't get into the business to work on me. It's never a good time to be mediocre. I don't remember a time in the business where people say, you know what, if I've got mediocre stuff, it's just going to sell. It just, I don't believe it's ever been that easy. So for my purposes, I wanted to work with the very best of the very best, work with the greatest artists alive, and help them get the greatest movies ever made into completion. Maybe so. If that's my goal. So I always believe that people have room, no matter how busy it is, no matter what other options there are, entertainment options, and the bar always gets raised. There's always greater competition that people still have room in their lives for great, and those are things I look to be part of.
And how you're not you're not feeling that the corridor for greatness in Hollywood is being eliminated, or that we're that it is becoming a better time to be mediocre. And
I thought it was a great year I thought it was a terrific year for movies, and there's a lot of trends I thought were interesting because I go to the movies all the time, and so I noticed something when I saw there's a few movies recently that kind of hit this for me. When I saw Substance, when I saw Materialists, when I saw Housemaid, there was one other one, maybe it was Wuthering Heights. It's like groups of young women excitedly, animatedly talking about the experience afterwards. It wasn't just another night at the movies for them. They were excited about going to it, and afterwards they were debating and discussing the experience. So that's something that's not going to be easily replicatable at home. And so and then I started thinking, okay, what people say that getting boys to the movies isn't as easy as it used to be, but there were movies that boys used to be able to, that when you go into a dorm room, you'd see Reservoir Dogs, and you'd see Scarface, or you'd see A Wolf of Wall Street. So what are those experiences, or Swingers? Those boys saw those movies many, many times and loved them. What is the equivalent in terms of that? So no, and then in terms of other stuff, I've always been a genre fan. It was beyond Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein and Sinners. It was an amazing year for genre films. You had Predators, Badlands, which was terrific. Obviously, Weapons. The last Final Destination was fun. Companion. So no, I thought there was a lot of great stuff out there, and I do believe there's. I mean, again, people talk negatively about where the business is. Every advent of technology always has new challenges. When television came in, I looked up the data. It dropped. The theatrical attendance dropped about 50%. That's a big drop. 2019 to now. So you obviously had COVID, a once in a century pandemic, and smartphone usage went up from I think 80 to 90% in terms of penetration in the U.S. and streaming services went from 50 to 80. That's so considering all that, a 20% drop off is not the totally unexpected. There's a lot of heavy factors, and so we went from 11 billion to a $9 billion business. Not great, but are there ways for us to get back to claw it back, and does it still prove there's a healthy, viable business? And I believe it is.
So, well, that you are like a one man disproof of pretty much everything I write. All my customers. I'll give you a little preview. In a couple hours, I'm going to publish. I do my annual State of the Union address on and this year's is entitled "Hollywood is Dead." But which is actually, you find in there a quote from a titan of this industry, who I don't name, who said that. But his point was actually that Hollywood as we know it is dead. That the structure of what we've had cannot survive anymore, and the stress is too great, and something else will rise up and offer some. Are you willing to? Can you knock down my thesis for me before I publish it and make a fool of myself?
Well, again, a $9 billion a year business is not again, given all the challenges that I just laid out. Hard for me to say it's dead. Now, again, it's been, when Nolan spoke in front of the DGA Awards the other night, Chris said the membership was down, employment was down 25% the first from 23 to 24, 40% from 24 to 25. Not great numbers. I looked it up. Los Angeles film business has been down the overall employment 24% over the last 10 years. So my concern is, what can we as an industry be doing to stop that, to increase our employment, and what else can we be doing to be more audience friendly? And there's a few things. Again, we have a lot of negative stuff to be put out there. In terms of movies are so expensive these days. Really, well, go through it, compare it to theme parks, compare it to sporting events, compare it to concerts. It's not. I think we're up to 50% from 2009 to now. Everything else I mentioned, sporting events, music, theme parks are multiple, 3 times, 4 times what they were. So we're still an affordable event for the whole family. So I think there's a lot more we can be doing to be perceived as a more family oriented business. I mean, part of I looked at the numbers. The data is not always great, but it looks like Republicans buy 50% less movie tickets than Democrats. Okay. So what is there that would seem, if you even got Republicans up to the same numbers as Democrats, where they got, there's your $2 billion that you went from 9 to 11 billion right off the bat. So what else can we be doing to erode the perception or turn around the perception that, again, that we're some elitist art form, when our roots are our roots were as popular entertainment for the working man.
You are like a wrecking ball to my warm blanket of despair that I like to wrap myself in. It challenges everything. So you wrote a piece in the Hollywood Reporter a few years ago, advocating for agents to be admitted to the Academy and get voting rights in the Oscars, which happened. I will give you. Can we credit you with that?
I didn't set back the cause at the very least, so I'll take it.
Okay. Given that this is something you're interested in, what suggestions do you have to improve the Oscars from here? What beyond that?
Well, it's interesting. One of the successes of our business has been, sometimes to a fault, people would say, we are relentless about how things play for our audience. Look at test screenings. That's one of the major reasons that separate our industry in the U.S. from everybody else. If the audience isn't feeling it, it's back to the cutting room for everybody. Okay, so if you have 3% of your audience walk out during a movie at a test screening, you've got a problem. Okay. Go to the Oscars sometime. You've got 10 to 15% of the audience outside milling around at the bar during the ceremony, and probably another 10.
That's me.
Thank you. And another 10% on their phones up in the balcony. If that was a movie, you had 25% of the audience leave a test screening, they would fire the director and the studio head in that order. You know, years ago, I was reading about Johnny Carson hosted the Oscars, I guess 1970, and he starts off and he goes, the Oscars. Now we're 2 hours of sparkling entertainment spread out over 4 hours. And everybody laughed. And they didn't go, oh my God, why are you saying this is so? They knew then it was boring. But in 1970, you had no other entertainment options. You could watch the Lava Lamp or watch Starsky and Hutch or whatever the options were then. So everything that we compete against, NBA, NFL, that in terms of the dollars that the streaming services spend for them, and in terms of eyeballs, every year they are relentless about figuring out, how do we improve our product? How do we change the rules? And we have the same thing we've always had. So how could you improve it? Well, a couple of things I've talked about in the past, but in terms of other stuff, I was thinking, if you have Republicans 50% less likely to buy tickets to Democrats, would it be the end of the world if you added a faith-based category in the motion pictures, like in a category, best faith-based film? If you look at the Grammys, they've got best Christian/gospel record, and that exists next to best rap album. And faith-based movies make $350 million or thereabouts a year. Isn't that's something maybe if we're seen as more welcoming tent, that will do? And those certainly faith-based films are able to access and motivate an audience that we're not. Maybe if we bring them into our tent, we have a 3-hour chance to show them all of our great movies. Maybe it expands everything. So that's one. Two, to vote for international films, you've got to see 15 films, which I think is terrific. So then let's do the same thing on every side. Why don't we have it that in order to stay a voting member of the Academy, you've got to show that you went to the movie theaters 15 times that year.
Sure.
Then third, what I would also
not on the Bel Air circuit, but
correct. Go
actually,
out to the movie AMC Century, Regal, wherever you want to go, Landmark, whatever. That's where prove you went 15 times. You're an active participatory member of the community. And the other thing I would say, especially given that I see AMC was down 10% quarter to quarter, is to stay a voting member of the Academy, make it that everybody's got to have prove that you got a subscription to an exhibition service, that AMC or Regal or anything else like that. Again, if we're not supporting our partners in exhibition, who is going to? So I'd like to see those steps. And I've talked about in the past, again, having a best action horror category or action thriller. I looked at the numbers, thriller or horror / action is probably 45% of the box office in 2024, in the last few years. That's half of our audience. What we need to be honoring or acknowledging what it is that our audiences are actually seeing and experiencing. I mean, when I was a kid, the bands that I grew up loving, Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd, they were never on the Grammys. So it never occurred to me to watch the Grammys. I was a big music fan. So let us be, and then further, in terms of what they always talk about, that like Kubrick never won or Hitchcock never won an Oscar. John Woo, Sam Peckinpah, Don Siegel, Robert Aldrich, never even nominated. So why don't we do more to honor these are what is the bedrocks of the motion picture business. So the other things I've talked about in the past are also release the voting tally. You go on Poly Markets, people want to see transparency. And the other thing I've talked about is having one movie eliminated throughout the evening, go from 10 to 1, not just having the one big one at the end. Again, it's both. I think imagine everyone texting each other, oh my God, it's down to Sinners versus Sentimental Value or whatever.
I mean, you pretty much know before the show even starts who's going to win, and certainly by the time 3 awards are given, it's all but certain. These are great ideas. My idea was if you accept a nomination, you have to pledge that you will attend 2 of the next 4 years' shows in person.
That doesn't seem a lot to ask.
It's to make this a community event again. However, I don't know that any of these improvements are going to get me away from the free food buffet in the lobby there. So, but we could try. It's also been said that you can recall every movie you've ever seen, including the theater and sometimes even the day of the week. So I've heard that said. So I want to try a couple.
Try me.
Okay, Kramer versus Kramer.
Lowe's, Astor Plaza.
Out of Africa.
I was in Cincinnati. Harvey and Bob had me doing a promotion for one of their movies, and I was there overnight and I saw it. It was like an early screening, but I couldn't remember the theater because I'm not in Cincinnati a lot.
Oh. Okay, Empire of the Sun.
Didn't see it in the theater.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
How about English Patient?
English Patient. I was at the premiere. I think I'm pretty sure it was Westwood.
Very impressive. What was the last movie you saw in a theater?
What was this weekend? It wasn't Wuthering Heights. Well, I saw Baz Luhrmann. I saw Baz Luhrmann's. I saw Wuthering Heights the week before at AMC, and there was the premiere of Neon's Elvis or Epic with Baz Luhrmann, which did great business. They did a fantastic job, and that was at the Chinese. And then there was a Q&A in Burbank right after which Guillermo did with Baz.
So what are we making stars anymore? I know directors are your game, but how do you feel about the star machinery?
I think it still can be done. I mean, recently you see what Guillermo did with Jacob Elordi, who was already having a great career, and now becomes even a bigger star with Frankenstein. And I saw it with Baz Luhrmann, with Austin Butler, and from Elvis. So it can still be done. We still need more shots to be able to do it.
I just want to go back big picture also. Like what are, just looking at you named a couple things that would pick up this industry, but what are some, there are so many as I was writing my State of the Union, I mean, the number of issues that we're dealing with and waiting with that feel like they're crushing us from all sides is kind of immense. And I kind of think of this Chinese maxim that Henry Kissinger used to quote, and that when there's order under the heavens, big problems become little problems, and little problems disappear. And when there's disorder, little problems become big problems, and big problems become disasters. And I feel like we're living through this state of disorder with so many kind of disasters all around us. What's your basic thesis about how we fight that back? And everything from runaway production to consolidation and all that. How do we approach all this?
Well, again, you have to. I find it gives me some comfort to look at the past and see what they did at that time. Like you look at the 50s with the advent of TV, down 50%. That exhibition. So what do? Well, a few things. They embrace technology, a cinema scope, big road shows. You look at you look at Avatar. Is Jim Cameron the only director who can make something fascinating and amazing in 3D? I don't think so. And what else did they do? Bible movies got big. Or is that again? We talk about faith-based films. Is that an area for us? And I went to the Sphere a few weeks ago, which I highly recommend. We saw The Wizard of Oz, and I was thinking about it. Well, that's an experience that they would have understood in the 1950s. It's bigger and better, but it's obviously Wizard of Oz is one of a kind. But people are spending. It's grossing. I guess it's almost $300 million.
I did the math for last year that Wizard of Oz at the Sphere would have been like number 9 on the domestic grosses last year on one screen.
I took our 4-year-old and 11 a.m. in the morning, and I thought it'd be for all families. It wasn't. It was probably 35 to 40 people, 35 to 40, and so I was like, well, what else can we? Getting back to what you were saying about showmanship. Once upon a time, 3D was called a gimmick, or William Castle had gimmicks. But what else can we be doing to expand makes it a sensory overload experience for an audience that gets them out and paying for it? Right? Again, addressing costs. When we talk about films like Rob Reiner's, it's like I still believe you can get those films made, but you can't get one. You can get Harry Met Sally made at 40. You can't get it made at 140. Something I've discussed before, Clockwork Orange or French Connection. They would be in the 20s right now in terms of what the $20 million range, what their costs were. They wouldn't be able to be sold for $100 million, $150. So I do believe there's still a way to get great work made, but it has to be cost sensitive.
Sorry about that. Have a barking dog there. Excuse me. One moment. That was Penny the corgi making a guest appearance there. Upset that someone
Stay
is walking
safe,
down
Richard.
the block, probably. Before we get into the final, one question I had before we get into the final questions, I thought you'd be particularly apt to asking about. Given runway production, that your clients, directors they spend a good portion of their life on sets. How has that affected their lives compared to 40 years ago? The fact that they are spending spending so much time, in Malta or Budapest or wherever it is. Has this affected how they feel about directing and the business? And
I wouldn't say the production itself. Most directors, when they're directing, they have blinders on. They don't take it. They are fully immersed. So being in Los Angeles or being Malta or Budapest or Toronto or Queensland, it's a full-time consuming thing. I wouldn't say that the production time itself is more drain, and the locale is the biggest issue for them. And from David Lean on, we've certainly seen directors who embrace the adventurous spirit. They're not studio. They weren't the idea of Michael Curtiz directing 3 movies in a year on the Warner Brothers lot. That left a long time ago. So each production is a new startup adventure, and it goes where it dictates both obviously with the tax incentive and where the locale of the story demands to be told.
Okay, well, we come now. Sadly, this time this has flown by. Once again, I barely scratched my list of topics and questions for you. As always, you're someone I could talk to for the whole week here, and I hope we'll see you again as events warrant and they come back. But we have two final questions that everybody gets, so I'll hit you with them. First of all, what would be your advice to a young person coming into the industry today, to being agent, becoming an agent or an executive, and going to that? What would you tell them?
Find talented people you will bet your life on. Just that simple. And talented stories that if you're a studio executive, again, I've seen Peter Rice when Baz Luhrmann had this thing to do. What they wanted to make a contemporary Romeo and Juliet based in Miami. Peter wrote a note to Peter Chernin running the studio. Peter was just a director of acquisitions really at that point, basically staking his entire career on trying to get that made, on advocating it in the strongest possible terms. And it's a movie. And at one point, Rupert Murdoch himself called Peter in. He wasn't out because Rupert hadn't been running the studio that long at that point or owning it. He called Peter in to see the Romeo. He said, "Let me see this Romeo and Juliet thing." And he starts looking through the book, and he turns up to Peter and goes, "Bit of a risk, this one." And so unless you're willing to take that level of bet on it, then find something else to do. And I throw the same thing back to a talent representative. Nothing matters more. Nothing matters besides your relationship with your artists and being a tireless, ceaseless advocate for them, willing to do anything possible to get them the resources to do their best work, protect their process when they're doing it, and be endlessly inventive about trying to have it reach the biggest possible audience. If you're willing to do that, there's still talent. There are talented storytellers out there who are looking for financing. There are talented performers and storytellers looking for great advocacy.
And our final question for you. This is our curriculum for Hollywood, where you get to schedule or assign 3 or 4 movies that everyone in Hollywood who works here is required to watch. I see Clockwork Orange on the wall.
Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorites. Well, obviously everybody's seen The Godfather, so people quote that one ad nauseum. Everyone's always seen. It feels like certainly every guy has seen Goodfellas 200 times. I grew up. I have 5 daughters, so I saw every single romantic comedy and every Julia Roberts movie over and over at the house. So it's hard for me to pick the ones. I would kind of broaden it a little bit and say, find your tastes. That is, some people love horror movies and they understand that genre better than anybody. If you understand romantic comedies or whatever it is, there's certain kinds of stories that you in particular are going to have. It is your taste in music. Some people like heavy metal, some people like hip hop. You cannot be all things to all people. Find the things that you love the most and are the expert in. And so when people say to Richard Rushfield, who understands everything about romantic comedies, I found the next Nora Ephron, I found the next Nancy Myers, people go, well, Richard would know.
That's fantastic. Robert Newman, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure, and please come again if you can.
And Richard, thank you for your support. For help keeping us honest in the business and advocating for great movies and executives who do their job brilliantly.
That's all it comes down to in the end. The great movies. I will talk to you soon.